For our website, the information is here. It is ods.ua.edu, and that's the first stop you need to make to engage with our office. So you will log into the website, go to our new student application, and at this point, if you've been accepted, you should have information like your campus-wide ID. So you'll hear that referred to as CWID. You should have that. You should have your MyBama login, so that will be your initials and your last name, maybe a number, maybe not, and then your password. So you'll need to log in with your MyBama information, and then when you submit the application itself is just basic kind of demographic information. You put that at the top, and then when you move on down, you select your diagnoses, and then there's a box at the end that's kind of like, tell us about what accommodations you're seeking. So if you've had accommodations in high school and you know what you've used, you can kind of fill that information in there just to kind of give us a heads up of what you're seeking. And then on the next page, you will upload your documentation. So our documentation guidelines are found on our website. So we have everything broken down by category. So we'll have, there's documentation guidelines for ADHD, learning disabilities, chronic illnesses, kind of the categories that I went through before. We have all of that written out. So if you want to take a glance at that, if you're not sure, if your documentation meets those requirements, you can always send it to us and we'll let you know one way or another. So when you submit your application and your documentation, we'll review it, and then you'll receive an email that says your documentation has been reviewed, we're all good, go ahead and make an appointment with an accommodation specialist to set up your accommodations. Or even if it doesn't meet the requirements, we'll typically say, this is missing something that we need. Here's what we're looking for. We'll go ahead and approve you for accommodations kind of on a conditional, like a temporary basis. We're not going to just throw you to the wolves, first semester, because we understand that it does take time sometimes for students to go, especially if it has to be another evaluation or you're trying to get in touch with a doctor. You're kind of left working on their schedule and not your own. So we try to be pretty flexible with that and going ahead and getting some accommodations in place, even if we are waiting maybe for some additional documentation. So once we receive that, you'll meet with an accommodation specialist in the office. We recommend that students meet with us once you've completed Bama Bound, because when we meet with you and go over all of the details of the accommodations, we also will show you how to request the accommodations in our online system. At that time, you can actually go ahead and make the request for your professors when you have a schedule. If you don't have a schedule, you can't do that, and so you're kind of left to log back in at a later time without us kind of supervising, doing it the first time, So it's best if you can have a course schedule when you meet with us initially. You can meet with us in Zoom over the summer if you want, or if you come down to Tuscaloosa. I know you guys aren't that far. Some people make trips down. That's fine too, or you could come some people will come and stay a few days around Bama Bound, and so if you guys stay an extra day and you want to come once Bama Bound is over, and you're still down there, that's fine too. So the accommodations process I'm kind of working through here. Like I said, when you meet with us the first time, we'll go over the details of the accommodations that are available to you. We'll also go over processes and procedures as far as how to request accommodations, how to book tests at our testing center and things of that nature. So we know that especially incoming freshmen, you have a lot of information coming at you, and remembering what to do exactly and when can be a lot. And so we have references on our website, and we send a follow-up email with a reminder of basically everything I just said. So we'll send you a follow-up email and say, thanks for meeting with us today. Here are some resources that I discussed, and so we'll talk about the tutoring and things that are available on campus, and I'll touch on that in a minute. And then we'll have links to videos, like tutorial videos, essentially, that will show you how to request accommodations in your classes, how to book tests with us, things like that. So there's always reference material to look back on how to complete some of the things.
I have a question. First, with that initial meeting, are parents allowed to go to the first meeting?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, as long as the student is fine. So everything, and I'll talk about this in a sec too, but everything is very student-driven and post-secondary. And so as long as the student is fine with the parent coming to the meeting or participating, we're fine with that. So we won't boot you out. So If you guys are using accommodations currently, some of those accommodations are things that would roll over likely, you know, and it just depends on what it is. So in high school, there are differences in the laws that apply to secondary, like high school education, and then that apply to post-secondary. So the main thing that varies from high school to college is we provide accommodations and not so many modifications. So some high school, like we may see an IEP or an accommodations plan that has tests that maybe the student isn't given multiple choice tests. They're given a different kind of test altogether, or they're given less to read, smaller assignments maybe than the general group of students, or whatever it may be. That doesn't really happen in college. So we would say the course requirements are exactly the same, but then we would offer accommodations to kind of to offer equal access. So I have a list of just some general accommodations here that I'll go over with you. So testing accommodations, like I mentioned, are definitely the biggest set of accommodations that we provide. So extra time, reduced distraction testing. Some of our students who may have a reading disorder, dyslexia, some visual processing disorders, they may need help with scantrons, like the bubbling is very problematic. So we'll have scantron accommodations. Maybe they use a reader in high school, so they would listen to tests being read aloud. We use assistive tech for that, and that can be an accommodation. Or maybe they use like voice to text, like input instead of typing. Like that's a type of a testing accommodation that we could provide. So use of technology in the classroom. Generally speaking, most professors are fine with students taking notes on their laptop and all of that, but we will authorize use of tech in a class for a student to take notes if they need to, or if that's the best way for them. We have on our resources page on our website, we have some recommendations for different apps to try that integrate recording. So you can go back and listen to what the professor said, and those are matched up with the notes that you took, so you kind of have a thorough set of resources to study from. Of course, accessible course materials. If we have students who need e-text, audiobooks, things of that nature, we provide that. Lots of, for my students, in particular, like any kind of alternate versions in large fonts, communication access services, so sign language interpreting, real-time captioning, closed captioning of videos. One thing that all of our students is, if you have completed the registration process with us and all your documentation is good, you'll be eligible for priority registration. And what that means is you get to sign up for your classes before everybody else. So unfortunately, that does not apply to incoming freshmen, because priority registration for fall was last week. So everybody misses the boat their first semester, and that's just the way the registrars work. But what that does mean, so you'll register with us for fall. In the spring, you'll be able to log in on an earlier day than everybody else and sign up for your classes. So if there are certain time frames that you want to take, certain teachers that you want to take, if some students have to negotiate a medication schedule, maybe they'll want to schedule things around that. That's why we offer the priority registration. And so you would have that every semester moving forward, and that doesn't have anything to do in terms of using academic accommodations in your classes. So some students will register with us solely for priority registration because they may not need something in their classes, but maybe they're working around a medical condition and they they need a specific schedule. So and then there are some students who may get some type of modification. Really, this is the only place like true modification comes in terms of course attendance, and that is for those students who may have like a chronic debilitating illness, and they may have more absences than what's required on a syllabus. And so we'll ask on the basis of disability for some flexibility on that. So you will see the word modification floating around a little bit, but that's usually the context of that. So when we meet with students, it's a very interactive process. We take a lot of the students' self-report into consideration. Sometimes we don't always get good documentation. We'll have a student who came in, maybe they are maybe they were newly diagnosed with ADHD and they're 20. Like a lot of students are diagnosed with things while they are in college. You know, they did okay through high school, got to college, and then all of a sudden things are more difficult and they're having a hard time figuring out, so they go get an evaluation. It turns out, oh, I have these diagnoses now. Never requested accommodations before. And sometimes doctors are bad about writing things like, hi, you know, John has ADHD and I'm treating him with this, please help him. And that is not, I mean, that's not very helpful to us in terms of documentation. And so that's when, that's why the intake with the accommodation specialist is very important. So we'll ask you questions like, okay, so what, if you've been diagnosed recently, tell me the problems that you're running into academically. Like, fill me in on how your classes have gone, what you've experienced while taking tests, what you've experienced while studying, and we'll kind of get that information from you if somebody else isn't willing to like write it down for us, essentially. So we'll consider the student's experience and input and all of that. And you know, if you're kind of on into a semester, we'll talk about how things are going currently and the class requirements and all of that. So we take lots of little pieces and put things together, and we can make it work. So. A lot of students come in and they have concerns about confidentiality. So there is FERPA, which is access to the educational record, and then there is information and access to disability-related information, and those two things float around out here separately. So a lot of, you know, like a parent could call and say, my kid signed the FERPA release, I should be able to talk to you. We actually have a separate release that you can sign with us when you meet with us at intake to say, you know, if anybody calls, you know, you can indicate to us who we could talk to about your accommodations or the documentation that we have on file. So those two things float around separately out there. When your accommodations are sent to your professors through our system, the students are in charge of that. Like, you log in and do that. You'll do that with us the first time, and then every semester after that, you log in January and send the accommodations to your professors. Meet with those people. The students' diagnoses are not on that information. So I know in high school, a IEP or a 504 plan or an accommodations plan, it's kind of all spelled out on there, and the teachers may see the diagnosis. In college, they won't. If a student feels the need to share that with a professor, that's fine. You can, but that's your right to disclose that information or not. So there are some students, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, you just go and you talk to the professors, hey, I get extra time on my test. How do I need to get that from you? And the diagnosis doesn't matter. And then there are other students who may have a seizure disorder or some kind of other chronic illness or something that may lead to an emergency, and it was probably best if the professor knows. So those students may feel a little more comfortable or may feel a little more, that it's a little more necessary to tell those professors. So that's completely left up to the student. And even when the students give consent for the parent to contact us about different things, you know, it's still expected that the students reach out to us if there are problems. You know, a lot of times, like, we'll have a parent call and say, hey, so-and-so ran into this issue in their class, and they're not able to fully describe. It's like kid reported it to parent, but they may not have all the information to be able to relay it to us for us to move forward. So even though we've talked to parent, we still have to contact the student and still have the conversation with the student to get more details about what the professor said and what the course requirements are and what is the experience, and let me pull this information up. And so usually it's best if the student can come to us. Just that will kind of expedite whatever the issue is being addressed, instead of having to play telephone and go back and forth and piece things together. We can be a little more direct with that. So, like I mentioned before, we provide academic accommodations. There is a place on campus that does academic coaching, skills building, tutoring. I'm going to get to that in a sec, but there are other places on campus that do provide accommodations. So housing, if a student has a housing accommodations need, they can go to the housing website. Any type of dining accommodation, so some of our students who may have like some type of like gastrointestinal disorder, sometimes they'll come to us for accommodations, but they also need accommodations for their meal plan. Or maybe they have an allergy and they need housing to know, and like accommodations need to be made, you know, with wherever they're living, and if it's a shared space, you know, so that can get kind of complicated. So unfortunately, we are kind of siloed. It's that we're not just a one-stop shop for every accommodation that somebody could need on campus. Same for parking services. One thing I didn't mention is we do serve students with temporary issues, whatever it may be. So like some kind of acute illness where, something drastic happened and you're going to miss 2 weeks of school moving forward. You had a concussion. You fell and broke your arm. There was a guy in the office day before yesterday. He broke his arm in 2 places last week and came in and was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about writing and taking my test. So we do provide services for temporary basis, and some of those things are outside of our usual stuff, but we do serve those students. We do parking services reminded me of that, because some of those students, if they broke a leg or something, they may have to get some temporary parking accommodations. So in terms of, like I mentioned, we're academic accommodations. So any kind of accommodations issue between you and your professor, we take care of those. We handle the arrangement of your accommodated testing. If they want you to come to our office, we have a whole process for that. Tutoring, academic coaching, counseling, all of that is found elsewhere on campus, and primarily that is found at the Capstone Center for Student Success. So when you go to our website, you'll see it says resources. When you click resources, you'll see academic resources, and so that's where you'll find the Capstone Center information. There's also a writing center on campus that can help with writing for any classes. We have a career center to kind of help offer some guidance on trying to decide what I'm majoring in, like this is the kind of job I'm thinking about, what's the best route for this. We do have a counseling center with licensed professional counselors. There's a tutoring center specifically for students who are in the College of Engineering. And then also we have the Student Health Center. The psychology clinic does some of the psychoeducational testing, so if students need to get tested or retested, they can go there for that. And we do have a speech and hearing center as well. So the Capstone Center is the main thing that we direct students to, because they do have the tutoring, particularly in like lower level classes that students take their freshman year. So some of the science, like everybody's complaining about science and math, and so that's what they have the most of. And then there are some, depending on what your major is, they do have tutoring for like certain stats classes, things of that nature that people also complain about that aren't necessarily something that everybody would take. They have a handful of those too. On our website, we also have a link to a local resource for paid tutoring if there's something that you can't find on campus, or maybe you feel like you need to work a little more closely or frequently with a tutor. Generally, the Capstone Center, they'll have a schedule that looks something like, Biology 108, Monday through Thursday, 5 to 7, room 202 in this building. And so you just show up during that time frame. There are people there and available to help, and you don't have to have an appointment. And they do have some scheduled learning groups that are smaller that you can book a time with as well. So they do have academic coaching, so people that meet one-on-one with students, and this is available to anybody on campus, not just ODS. We encourage the students who are registered with us to let them know, and so they can kind of think about it maybe in a different way, especially if it's students who may have some executive functioning issues. Those people know what that is. So if you say that to them, they'll say, oh, okay, and so they may keep some different things in mind in terms of how they are coaching and what they are coaching. So time management skills, organization skills, study skills, things of that nature. Trying to keep an eye on my time here. So my last couple of slides, I have how can parents help? And the main thing that we recommend is just understand and manage the expectations about the transition between high school and college. A couple of the things that I wanted to highlight here. Study skills and note-taking strategies should be worked on now, today, tomorrow, through the summer, and especially, I would recommend you guys take a look. Some of y'all may be great at note-taking, great at engaging with things like during the class period. A lot of students struggle with that, and we hear that over and over and over, and so people appear to come grossly underprepared for or with the skills that's necessary to like adequately engage with the, a classroom of 350 people where the professor is like clipping through things, So thinking about how will I follow along? How will I keep up? What resources can I use? So on our resources page, we have some recommended apps. if students like to take notes by hand, take a look at the link for the Live Scribe pen. It is a pen that you write with that actually records, and it syncs what you wrote to the audio recording of what the professor is saying. So when you go back and review your notes, you can tap here, and what was spoken when you wrote this will play back. And then you can also upload your notes to your computer, and it works the same way. So, you know, there are several apps, and the Live Scribe pen work that way. So we really encourage students to kind of explore different note-taking apps throughout the summer, maybe before you come. So when you hit the ground running, you won't fall behind the first few days, like trying to figure out what this professor is doing, because they're all vastly different. Vastly different. So can't emphasize that more. Certainly more out-of-class work is expected. So, and you know, you go to high school and you're there from 8 to, 2:30, 3:15, whatever it is, and you're there all day, every day, and you have time, you have study hall, you have scheduled time to work on things, whatever. You know, when you go and take Psychology 101, you are in class 3 times a week for 50 minutes. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 10:50, and you're gone. And so you're not with your teacher anymore. They're not in the classroom telling you, you're not there for them to follow up with you and tell you what to do, like you have your syllabus. We use Blackboard, which is our online learning management system. So you'll log in, you'll see what assignments are due and things like that. So you can't just think, oh, well, I'll go to class and get it done. Like, that's not what class is for in college. It's just different. There's not really time where, in high school, it's like, okay, well, we're talking about this, and now we're going to work on this worksheet, or we're going to work these problems and stuff. That just doesn't, it's more just lecture-based. You take down the notes, and then if there's homework and other things, you work on that outside of class. So there is a general rule of thumb. For freshman classes, it's not always going to be this intense, but they say for every 1 credit hour, it's 3 hours. You should at least think about having 3 hours of time outside of class to work on it. So a 3-hour class is what most of them would be like 9 hours of work outside of class a week. Now, some will not be that bad at all. Some will take more time than that, depending on if you're talking something like chemistry or maybe a math, and those are things that you don't excel in or you don't understand that easily. Me, and by you, I mean me. Like, those sorts of classes were the things that took me the longest. English 101 and 102, kind of same thing. Those classes will be really small, but those are all paper writing. So you'll learn about different writing strategies and stuff in class, and then you'll go and write a number of papers throughout the semester, throughout. So when you look at your schedule, you're like, this isn't bad at all, and it's not in terms of being required to sit in the class, but you do have to manage your time wisely outside of class, or you'll find yourself in a place. And I was the procrastinator, so I'm not being shady about that at all. I learned very hard lessons about that myself, so it is what it is. So UA has a mixture, especially as freshmen. You'll have some small classes like English. You could have some classes with up to 400 people. So know thyself a little bit in terms of what you need to consider in the classroom. If you sit in the back of an auditorium of 400 people and you'll literally never pay attention because you're back there, try to park yourself at the front. You'll have to kind of sort through what the best environment is like. I'm glad to see that you guys have spaces like this, because a lot of spaces do look like this in the college environment. They're not traditional classrooms just with desks. Not to say that there aren't any, but the majority will be larger. Sciences are usually pretty big. Some of the social sciences and stuff early on are pretty large. And then as you move on into your major courses, those classes will get smaller over time. But the core things that everybody has to have, that's where you're going to have those really big classes. Professor will not know your name unless you make a point to go and speak to them. And so it will be necessary for you to talk to them about your accommodations. But you have to work a little harder to develop a relationship with a professor in college for sure. And there are just fewer opportunities for grading or individual feedback because of that. So you'll have to pop into office hours if you have questions, need help with things. Professors usually have scheduled time frames. And they'll say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 2 to 4, my door is open, show up. And they're happy to help. You just have to go there. One of the things, how can parents help? Just keep a reference of the campus resources. So when student calls and says, I'm really having a hard time, or this isn't making sense to me, to be able to look back and say, oh, I think I remember something about where you can find help for that. That will just kind of end the spiral a little bit quicker, in terms of saying, okay, let me get you connected to somebody that can help you. Of course, the self-avocation part, students do have to go and talk to the professors about what accommodations are, or how the accommodations will be applied in the class. And so we don't do that for y'all. The accommodations letters will come from our office and we'll go to them, but you'll have to check in with them and say, how do I get extra time in your class? How do I do X, Y, Z? Hey. Yeah. Yes.
You can make these requests up front, like it's kind of from their perspective, they share that it's not like something you can come back later and go, I wish I'd asked for accommodations. Like you really need to go, when you're registering, you need to go through this process as a freshman early.
It's best to, just to expedite the process. And once you're registered with us and these things are available to you, even though you may not need them in certain classes, there are some lower level classes and freshman classes that our students absolutely do not need accommodations in them based on the format. Like there's nothing for you to use in here unless it's a student who may have like a chronic illness or something like that, But it's best to just go through the process, be set up with us, be familiar with us, and know what to do at whatever point you think, okay, well, maybe I do need to go ahead and request an accommodation. Because if you wait, you're going to call us and say, hey, I need an appointment. And our front desk person is going to say, great, our next available is next Tuesday at 3. Does that work with your schedule? Oh, you're in class then. How about Wednesday at 2? So again, we have 2,700 students registered with us, and we're trying to it's a matter of volume. So the likelihood of you being able to come in and meet with somebody like tomorrow because you have a test the day after tomorrow is slim. So then it turns into this whole sense of, oh my God, what was I, and that happens a good bit. So it's best to go ahead and take care of it in the front end so you don't put yourself in that situation to freak out later, Just know what's expected, and then at whatever point you're ready to use it. And it's from one class to the next and from semester to semester, it's left to the students to decide what they need and what they want to request or need to request for every class. So, I keep going back to English. English 101 doesn't have tests. English 102 doesn't have tests. So you don't have to request that accommodation. You won't have to talk to the professor about that. So there's a good bit of flexibility at the beginning in terms of what you'll have to request and what's actually necessary. So, one thing, a lot of students, I know I've talked about volume and numbers and all of that, but I want students to feel assured in that as well, because a lot of students feel like this is only going to be me. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to go talk to them. What if they don't know how to handle accommodations? What if? Again, there are 2,700 of you. And that 2,700 has 4 or 5 teachers each. And so we send out thousands of accommodations letters. So especially for some of the big classes, Chem 101, that professor may get 12 accommodations letters from that particular section. And so they're providing accommodations for all these students. And so a lot of professors set a plan before classes even start. They said, okay, this semester or this year, I'm going to arrange testing accommodations here. I'm going to send my students here. Here is the plan, and they'll come in and they'll have all of that like packaged and ready for you and tell you what to do. So there's no mystery in how things are going to play out. So so you can kind of rest assured that you're not the only one. And when you go to a professor, it's not like they've never heard of this before. So and we we're always a resource to professors. If they get something on an accommodations letter that they're not sure about, they can always call us. We interact with them all the time. So you're not the only one floating around out there. No need to be self-conscious about that. And just the sooner you can connect with us and take care of everything, the better. And then that's just another box checked out of all the list of things to do in terms of getting set up and coming to campus. And so you'll at least know that piece is taken care of, and you know who to go to for help. And we will always refer. So if you come to us with this problem, that problem, and it's not us, we'll get you to the person that you need to get to. So
I've got a question. You've gone over this, but like set Biology 108 or whatever, that might be 400 people. So my student has gone and talked to you to set up what they need. And so they show up that first day of class, they introduce themselves to this person and say, I have these accommodations. And so they might have 3 tests that semester.
Yep.
So how does that look for that test? So does the student say, okay, Miss Amy, I have a test coming up on October 10th. I need a room and I need a time to come take the test. Is that how it works, or how does all that get coordinated?
Yes. So when we do the intake part of the intake, we show you guys how to use our testing portal. Okay. So the student, when, you go and talk to Professor Smith, they say, oh yeah, schedule all of your tests at ODS, no big deal.
Okay.
The student can look at the syllabus, see all the test dates. You can log into our online portal, into the testing section, go in, select Biology 108 from the drop down, and you schedule all the tests yourself in our online. Yeah, so students go in and schedule those tests themselves, but we show you how to do that while we meet. Yep.
Okay, so they look at their syllabus and then they go into the portal.
Yep.
Set up their schedule.
Yep.
And y'all have all the materials for that student when they show up.
Yes. So the student schedules the test. We will go in, and if it's a class like that and there's 10 students, we will email Dr. Smith, and Dr. Smith will send us the test or the login for the test if it's online. And so the students will come to our office at the same time the rest of the class takes the test elsewhere, just for like test security and stuff. Students generally take tests at the same time. And then we'll administer the test. So the student basically just signs up for the time and shows up. We get the test to the professor or from the professor and then back to the professor, and they get it graded and all of that. We have a whole online system where they can upload tests to us. So that we have a really robust online management system for the accommodations and for the testing. And we have a full separate testing staff, testing manager, 2 testing coordinators, a bunch of student workers and stuff. So we try to keep it as a well-oiled machine best we can over there. So
All that at Hauser?
yep, all of that's at Hauser. We're all at the same place. And then when you go to our website, we have a testing presentation. Like there's some information about our testing and stuff on the website too, if you want to check that out. So, but that's the main thing that students are worried about. So what am I supposed to do about my test and all of that? And there are some places on campus who provide testing accommodations. So lower level maths in the math learning center, they have a separate room where they do all of the accommodated testing there. So if you're taking a math test that's like math 005 to 1 or 227, you'll actually take the test there with them, and they have a whole process for that. So they share that with students once they come to them about their accommodations. So, it's not if you can have your accommodations, it's where do I need to go for these? And so that's the main conversations that's had around the testing accommodations. So, what other questions? Hey.
If they have a accommodation, no matter what it is, and there's, say, 10 different kids with 10 different accommodations in class, no matter what the accommodation is, they're going to go to the testing site?
It would only be if they have testing accommodations. Yes, extra time on tests, yes, yeah. So we may have students who may have accommodations that aren't testing accommodations, like maybe they need something else in the classroom. If they don't have testing accommodations, they'll just take the test in the class with everybody else. So that's only if they need that reduced distraction testing, extra time, specialized tech for either reading or writing, something like that. That would be what would drive them elsewhere for the testing.
If there's a particular test they don't feel like they need the accommodation, is it okay to take it in?
Yep, it is. They should just say, hey, I don't think I need that in this particular class. Some students will go in and check all the boxes for all the accommodations at the beginning of the semester and just go ahead and send it to the professors because they're not sure what I do or don't need yet, and it's the beginning of this, beginning of the school year. And so they can follow up with the professor later and say, hey, I know I sent you on my accommodations letter, it says I need XYZ. I don't think I need that for this class, so I'll just take the test here with you, and they'll say, okay. So it's not required. Even if they do send that to them, they have the right to make the decision on that. So, an informed decision.
But you're saying, so like those options of what accommodations, because I would say when you walk into this journey, as a high school kid, thankfully we have someone who rocks on the skin. You don't always know what accommodations are out there.
Yeah.
Extra time is what everybody's trying
Yes,
to
yeah.
other things. So in your consultation with them, if there are other things available,
Yep.
when you meet with them and hear from them and see their diagnosis, you also collaboratively make recommendations.
Yes.
You might should try this.
Yes, yeah.
Be something that we're familiar with.
Yes, yeah, no, we absolutely do that. Depending on what the student is reporting, I'll say, oh, well, have you ever tried, XYZ? And they'll say no. And I'm like, maybe you should. And we'll kind of talk about what that is or what that means.
And then back to the second part of that being, and this camp has been a rock star for us, taking whatever our diagnosis is and helping us advocate for what accommodations we need on college boards.
Yes.
So if we've had that complete battery of testing
Uh-huh.
as a 10th grader,
Oh, yeah.
to get us through high school,
Yes.
SATs and ACTs, we're not going to have to chew that dog on testing.
No. Typically, if it's something like psychoeducational testing, we look for that from ages 13 and older.
Okay.
So, and then for our purposes, yes, no, yeah. No, and we, and for our purposes, as, if we come in and say, here are the accommodations that are available to you, and you're like, that sounds great, and you use those all throughout college, we wouldn't request updated documentation just for the sake of requesting it. I know at least with public schools, they're looking for evaluation every 3 years. All that goes out the window. The only time a student who comes to us and is currently using accommodations, if the accommodations were, or if the documentation was good out the gate, if the student requested something that wasn't supported in the documentation, that's when we may say, oh, well, could you get us some additional documentation on that? Or it sounds like you may need to be reevaluated because none of this is like reflected in your documentation or like supported, or it doesn't make sense to us. Like we can't piece those things together. Then that's when we would ask for more. But generally speaking, if you come in and are approved for accommodations and you're all set, moving forward, you wouldn't need to submit additional documentation to us. So, other questions? I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I feel like I sped through that. I'm really sad you couldn't see my slides. They were wonderful.
But yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'll tell you from documentation standpoint, our kids are usually really good with ACT, like, because that's where we sort of ask, like in sophomore year,
Mm-hmm.
get current testing, so because that's what it takes to get approved.
Right. Yes, they are very particular. Yeah.
They are, but y'all are, and I'll tell you, from a personal experience, my daughter went to Alabama, and you guys are rock stars. Like every adult I worked in Alabama.
We tried.
Has been phenomenal. I mean, it was just phenomenal. So, and parents, I will tell you, I don't know, just from a personal standpoint, we did that Zoom meeting when there was like classes started on a Wednesday. Does it always start on a Wednesday?
It does.
We did that meeting like Monday or Tuesday where Miriam was already at her dorm. So it gave her that responsibility to get online and here I am from work, I may have been at work, but I was like, hey, so it was like, but it was all fresh in her mind, like right then, like you have to go see your professors, like that was always mine, like
Right.
translate, you're hearing like Charlie Brown's teacher, and it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, he's adult. And
That's one thing I know. It's like there's the fine line of like, okay, well, I want to get this finished, taken care of, over, done with early in the summer. And then, oh, there's now 60 days between now and when I actually have to go talk about this stuff with my professors again. So that's why we have some of those online resources just for reminders and refreshers on processes and what to do, because not everybody can come in August 17th. Right. You know what I mean? And plenty of people want to take care of it in advance. And it's not, the process itself is pretty straightforward. All of the lead up and the unknown, like for you guys, like what you experience now, you haven't gone through it, is much more like convoluted and oh no, and this is going to be a thing. But once you actually walk through it, it's pretty straightforward. So it's not as much to remember. Especially for students who have pretty standard accommodations, like testing accommodations and stuff, outside of like something weird, there's not a whole lot to keep up with, and we have good resources for that to look back. So don't, come in. We're just like, we're waiting for you whenever you're ready. If you wait, some people will roll in 2 weeks into the school year. I mean, we don't have a deadline for registering with us, and so students can come in at any point, but a lot of times people will wait, and then they're like, oh, I have a test in 2 days, and they're not going to be able to get in because they've procrastinated, and like we've had the documentation, and we sent you an email that said we're ready to meet, 3 months ago, but here we are. And so there's a fine line to walk there. It's like, I understand not wanting to be too early, but don't push it. Don't push it. Yeah.
I mean, speaking for my student who's left, but I didn't need an accommodation, and that I wasn't prepared for that 300-person chemistry class.
Right.
Yeah.
You walk into that place.
Yeah. Yes. Well. Yeah. And that's it. Usually when I meet with my students, that's one of the things too that I kind of talk about. Like if I can see their schedule, I have enough. I've been here long enough and have enough kind of institutional knowledge to say, okay, well, this class is probably going to be pretty big. This one, this is kind of what you can expect. Some of the people that haven't been there quite as long as me may not be able to give a lot of insight into that. But we try to prepare students for what to expect if they're meeting with us prior to classes starting, you know, so it won't be just a complete surprise, you know, when you show up and you're like, oh, okay, this one, yeah.
Parents, they always say, you can't leave them after Bama Bound, because you go there and you're like, I'm ready. And
Yeah.
it's like, you have to go home, and then come back.
Right, yes, yeah, I know. Yes. And a lot of people are like they come into our office just for general information after Bama Bound, and they're like glazed over, you know, so yeah. So if you want to separate those meetings, we're absolutely happy to do that, so.
And most professors are, I mean, they're going along with all of this that's presented to them.
Yeah, especially like I said, a lot of the lower level professors, because we do have so many students, it's just almost part of their preparation to teach the class and stuff. I mean, there are people, you know, there are always going to be people that give us a headache.
Yeah.
But I know you're shocked by that, academia, but I mean, grand scheme of things and the number of people that work here and the number of students that we have, a lot of people are just rolling with it and doing exactly what they need to do. So that makes all of our lives easier. Thank God for those people.
So students, the thing you want to take away from this is it's up to you. Mom can't make that phone call anymore. Like, if you don't go and do it, it's not going to be done, and you can't come back and say, they didn't, it doesn't matter. Like,
We're approachable.
yeah, right?
We're approachable.
Right?
Yeah.
You're approachable, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do it yourself and advocate for yourself. And you know what? I'm going to say these students are out here.
I was going to say, you were saying all these wonderful things about the people, so I have no reservations about what y'all will do in terms of coming in and getting set up with us. So
You're getting some great tips.
we like that. That also makes our life easier. Responsible students, professors doing what they need to do, everybody's happy. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes, absolutely.
Y'all better come and get some.
Oh yeah, I've got some little squeezy elephants, yardsticks, and then the information here. Y'all for sure grab that because it has all of our website info.